this man, my not only a long-term colleague, but also close friend, Stephan Gerschewski. And he may be one of the most multicultural and culturally experienced people I've ever known. So Stephan was born in Germany, right? And he's a German national, but he has worked for a long time in different parts of the world, notably lately in Korea for a few years. And now he is at one of the best universities in the world, at least when it comes to international business, University of Reading in UK, in the United Kingdom. So those of you who are from my area, that's basically, you know, Harvard, Stanford, they don't do really international business. So there are a bunch of schools in the world that may not be as known as far as the brand of the school, but when you look at what they publish, whom they have there, so this university is one of the leading institutions in international business. And so I'll turn the microphone now to the speaker. And Stephan, I'm not sure if you would like to start a little bit with your own experience or start right with the topic, but students, you can ask questions. You can ask questions by clicking the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and type those questions. Or if you really want to talk to the speaker, raise your hand and I will be able to add you to the panel here and you will be able to engage directly. So if you would like to ask a question, if you would like to talk directly to the presenter, we can do that. But let's first give him a chance to outline the topic and then we will follow with the questions. Please.
Okay, yeah. Thank you very much, Vas, for that very kind introduction. First of all, yeah, I'm very glad to be presenting my first webinar ever today. I haven't done it in the past, but as you just mentioned in the introduction, I've been involved with XCulture for quite a few years, I think almost from the start. I think I was 2013 or 2012 was the first time I started with XCulture. And I was at that time still in South Korea, so currently I'm working in Reading, United Kingdom. And yeah, I'm very excited to talk today about XCulture, about my experience. I also compare a little bit different cultures based on my first-hand experience, and I'm happy to then answer also any questions that we may have. So I prepared a PowerPoint presentation. It's about 10 slides or so. So I'm going to share the screen. Is it? Should I just check?
Yes. So there is a button there that looks like raised hand. So you just press that button and it should allow you to show your screen. Yes.
Okay. Is that?
Mm-hmm. And if you go in the presentation mode, we should see it. Yeah. Perfect.
Can you see that now? Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So so the overall topic which I will focus on is basically about communication in global virtual teams and why email alone is not enough. So I think in any team, be it global virtual as well as face-to-face, communication is one of the most important success ingredients. And more so, I would say, actually in virtual teams, because the challenge is, as you all know, you are not able to meet face-to-face. So there's a lot of interaction that is potentially missing. But as we will outline today, there's several other methods apart from email where you can overcome those challenges. So this is one of my favorite pictures here. That's me live in action. Actually, quite recently, that was done in Henley Business School. So I'm from Germany originally. Probably you could guess from my German accent. Still, after 13 years or 14 years outside of Germany, I still have a little bit left. Although I'm sometimes also, people think I'm from South Africa or from Scandinavia. I get that too. I did my undergraduate degree in Germany, International Business Administration, a small university in Furtwangen University. I'm not sure whether, do we have any German students in the audience?
We do have quite a few participants from Germany, but I'm not sure if we have anyone in the webinar today.
Okay.
So do we have any Germans?
Maybe not.
To see. And we have also a class from Austria. So not far there.
Well,
but again, I don't really see anyone there. Mm-hmm.
That's close enough. Okay. Well, yeah. So after I finished my undergraduate degree in international business, I moved then to New Zealand. I did my master's and PhD degree in international business at Victoria University of Wellington, which is the capital city. And I stayed there for almost 7 years. Was very
about that. So you've been also in Australia and New Zealand, right? So
yes.
so you literally have been everywhere.
Well, sort of.
Well, it's as far as it
right.
gets, like literally as, you know, as distinct a culture as, you know, okay, very interesting. I didn't know that.
So I've got still a lot of friends, and obviously my PhD supervisor,
Right.
still close contact, publishing together. So although I must say I haven't been to New Zealand for a while now. After I finished my PhD, I haven't really returned. I should.
It's far. It's far. It's like, you know.
That's the thing. Yeah, it's a bit far. And with family, it's even more complicated with kids traveling that long.
Yeah.
Okay, so after I finished my PhD in New Zealand, I then moved to South Korea. I think probably we will have a few Korean students in the audience. The first university I worked for was Hankuk University of Foreign Studies. That was also actually the first university where I participated with XCulture. It's a foreign languages university specialized in foreign languages, and they are based in Seoul, very big city, of course. And I worked there for 3 years. I moved then to Daejeon, which is Hannam University. Stayed there for another 3 years, worked there as an assistant professor for international business. And then I made the big move to the UK. So Henley Business School. I'm very honored actually to work for that very prestigious school. And as Vas said in the introduction, it is for international business. It's has a long history. Some of the founding fathers of IB, like John H. Dunning or Alan Rugman, they have all worked for University of Reading. So it's a very, has a lot of tradition and a lot of history for international business in particular.
Yeah, you students may not recognize those names if you're not in the discipline. For us, it's like, you know, like Einstein for physics. So
yeah, so I remember when I did my PhD, I was reading those papers and those books that were published in the 70s or early 1980s. So and now working for that institution is quite an honor.
Yeah, I still remember when Alan Rugman visited us. I was in Canada as a PhD student, and he came to do a presentation that was like literally an equivalent of Einstein coming for a presentation. Oh, so big.
Yeah, it's good. So it's a very good, it's quite a research intensive school, but we also have quite close links to the industry, being close to London, and also Reading is emerging now more and more as a technology hub. And for example, there's a lot of Chinese expatriates recently moving to Reading, because Huawei, the smartphone company, they have opened a big sales office in Reading. So we have a lot of and there's Microsoft, Oracle. So there's a lot of IT now in Reading. So that's we try also in other courses that I'm teaching. I try to invite guest speakers from those companies, and we work closely with some of the local firms in the Berkshire region. So as I mentioned before, it's actually not 2013, it's 1 year earlier, 2012. So it's been a very good experience for myself as well, and I've seen how XCulture has really developed from the really early beginnings to a hugely successful, I think, and hugely interesting project. I remember when I first started with XCulture 2012, we had McDonald's case studies or something, was it? Or they had a given company, and but it was not that they worked for a real life company. It was in the past already, and was almost like a Harvard Business School case study. And then we evolved from there, and now it's I think I'm really excited to be part of XCulture. And even though some students find it very challenging, but I think in the end everyone is benefiting from that experience with XCulture. Okay, and now let me move. So that's me in a nutshell. Let me move on to XCulture. So I'm not sure. I think maybe that's even higher now. Is it? I think that was it's more than 5,000 now.
Yes, the numbers keep growing, and so we are not keeping up with the change, changing the slides and videos. So, but yes, it's a little bit more than that now. So yes. Yeah,
it's very global project. And also, I must say, there's a lot of interest now from Henley Business School about XCulture. So they seem quite interested, and they are supportive of XCulture, which is it's good for me. So that's the the tasks. So we have a company, entrepreneur, small company or medium-sized company, or can also be a larger company, and they have a business problem, a real-life problem. And with XCulture, basically the idea is that you work in a global virtual team with students from all around the world, in every continent basically. And as you can see, you are not able to meet face-to-face, but you have to communicate via virtual means. Now, let me move on to the main topic for today about communication in global virtual teams and why email is not sufficient. Now, when you just generally look at the role of communication, I mean, obviously, you all received the first welcome letter by email, and that's the most efficient way, I think, to introduce yourself to each other, so that you have the email address. But what is very important, and I think there's also some studies and some papers that we looked for XCulture, usually the more varied your communication is in terms of the methods, the more productive you are, the more efficient you are working, and also the more the closer relationship you can form. So email is usually, it's quite time effective because you send it and then it's over. But if you work in a team, then especially in a global virtual team, what is really important at the beginning, that you establish trust. Now, how do you establish trust? Only by email? It's quite difficult. So other methods, and I'm sure you've all read the XCulture training file. There's several methods that you could use. So for my students, for example, I asked them actually last week what they use, and the most common answers were WhatsApp. They do a WhatsApp group. Some of them do a Facebook group, but not all of them. Some even said they don't use, or they don't like Facebook. They don't want to show their privacy. And then also other, I think, WeChat, somebody said used, and Skype. So these seem to be common, but WhatsApp seems to be the most commonly used in my current class. And I mean, it doesn't really matter which brand it is, if it's WhatsApp or WeChat or Facebook Messenger. The idea is with those groups, you are actually communicating in real time. And that is often a really good and effective and very speedy collaboration tool.
So Stephan, here's a question about that. So one student is asking in terms of differentiating the communication methods. So what are you saying is that if you use the email, then there is a delay between a comment and a reply, right? Whereas if you use WhatsApp, for example, audio call, you can communicate right away. Why does that matter? So why does it matter if you have a live conversation as opposed to delayed conversation?
I think, it is a good question. I mean, it's not always necessary, I think, to have those WhatsApp groups or chatting tools. But for example, if you try to have a group meeting and you discuss, like in the brainstorming phase, for example, where you are more or less trying to find out which company you are using, who is doing what, some sort of delegation, establishing trust, finding out who can be the leader of the team. I think then it's quite important that you have that more interactive effect, because, I mean, if you send an email and then you wait for one day and then you get a reply, it's I think not very efficient, I think. And given that XCulture is quite, every week you have to work quite regularly, and you have to be on top of the game. So I think if you can manage that, I mean, of course, it also depends on the time differences in the time zones. I mean, that's the added complexity. Again, I asked my students last week when I was teaching them, have you managed to have a Skype video call or an audio call together with all the team members? And actually, I think not all of them did, but a few teams already tried to manage that. And then I asked them, what about the time difference? And I said, oh yeah, I got up at 5 a.m. or something. So It may mean for some of your team members that you have to maybe sacrifice some of your sleep or no. But I think, and then was it worthwhile, or was it worth it getting up at 5 a.m. in the morning? And they said, yeah, it was actually good to talk to them. And again, I think that's quite different, say, from relying only on email, which can be a little bit, not so rich in communication.
Yeah, we looked at the data from XCulture. So since we asked students how they communicate, so we looked at the difference between the teams that did have at least one Skype conversation versus only email. And so the teams that did have a Skype conversation were happier, gave each other higher peer evaluations, and actually did a better job. And we don't know for sure if it was because of the Skype conversation that they became more effective, or it's more effective teams prefer to also have a Skype conversation. But there is at least a correlation, even if we don't know which one is causing which.
Yeah, I think that I'm sure there's a correlation. Maybe we cannot say it's a causal effect, but I think also if I think maybe if about my perspective, I think I would be more motivated. It's not only for the actual outcome then, but I think it also impacts on the motivation of the team members. If they're able to see each other, if they're able to talk to each other, and it creates a more sense of, we are all in the game, we are all in the team, and now we have to work together. That sort of maybe even peer pressure in a way, or in a shared accountability, maybe, I think.
Yeah, that is a very interesting issue. We are actually trying to do a research. So one of the big challenges in global virtual teams, and please correct me, Stephan, if your research shows otherwise, but it almost seems to me that in global virtual teams, there is a difficult time developing this sort of sense of responsibility to one another, a sense of, if you will, friendship, or, you're not just two words on the screen, you are actually Stephan Gerschewski, a person, a friend, and I cannot just skip my deadline because, if I do, it will impact the whole team. And so unless we have a video conversation, it's hard to kind of connect those two words on the screen with the actual person. Whereas when you have a conversation on, live video, you sort of develop a whole different appreciation for those people and this sense of social obligation to the team. I don't know, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Vas. And I would agree with that you are just, you feel more part of the team, and that you are actually then doing more for the team, and you all have a shared accountability and responsibility for the final report. And I mean, I understand that we're also doing some research on free writing, which is always an issue in virtual teams as well as in face-to-face teams. But I think the more you interact with each other, the less likely it's probably that you have a free ride in your team, because you cannot just then hide, or then you would feel maybe even more guilty. Whereas if you never meet each other, if you just have email contact, then it may be more likely that there's a free ride in the team. I mean, that's just a hypothesis. I don't know if it's true, but I think it could be maybe interesting research topic.
I see a comment from students, and you already touched upon that issue, that email can be slow, but it's not only that it's slow per se. My experience shows that when teams rely only on email, they may have a wrong impression about how responsible and responsive their team members are. Because let's say, for example, Stephan, you are in the UK and I'm in the United States. So we have about 6-7 hours time difference. Let's say I send you an email now. So I wake up and I decide to send you an email. And so by this time when you receive the email, for you it will be afternoon. So you may be done with your work. So you may be done with the emails for the day. So you will not see your email until you sleep and wake up tomorrow. But then when you wake up tomorrow, read your email and reply it to me, I will be sleeping. So I will not see your reply until basically 2 days from now. And that may create an impression that Stephan is not responsible. I mean, I sent him an email and it took him 2 days to respond. And so it may create an impression that maybe he's a free rider, as you said. And if he's not working very hard, why should I? And then so I will lower my effort. But then the same thing will be for you. Then you will look at my effort and you will think, oh, if Vas is not working, why should I? And so you will slow down even more. And so before we know it, even though we reply to the emails, the moment we wake up and see that message, it still creates an impression that we don't care. And so I don't know, I mean, does that make sense to you? I mean, could that be sort of, this bias that creates free riders, or at least people who are not happy with performance of their team members?
I think that's could be one of the reasons that you don't have that immediate feedback that you would have in in a phone conversation or in a chat, even in a chat room, where you wait 1 or 2 days until you get the reply, and then you may have already forgotten what you wrote in that email in the worst case, or you may be distracted, you read it and then you do something else. It's all those kind of factors which it's not very suitable, I think, for that kind of group work in some regards. I mean, later, I think once you start with the project and once you have delegated the tasks, I think then it's a different story. Then you can have email updates, and you don't need to meet face to face all the time, because then you have already decided who is doing which part of the project, and then you can have maybe a group chat or something once everybody has worked on the topic. But I think in the beginning, especially because you don't know each other and you are not able to meet face to face, if it's possible, I think I would always recommend students to arrange a sort of Skype video call, or arrange a WhatsApp group chat, just to get to know each other. And I mean, the interesting thing that you touched upon earlier was that I wanted to comment on about the issue whether it's necessary to have that social relationship, and like a sort of you're my friend, or this is my private things and I'll share that with you. I think some of the students also actually, or based on my experience, they are not necessarily always happy to share that with other XCulture members, especially at the beginning, because they say, okay, we have that project, I don't know that person, I don't know who he is, why should I talk to them about some personal things that I would talk to a friend? So
very true, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I have to tell about my personal things. I think it's more about just seeing the person sort of in flash, right?
Okay.
So,
I mean, I think, but if you, for example, if you have a Facebook chat, for example, or Facebook Messenger, then you're already giving away a lot of your private things that you would not normally give to a stranger that you don't know, who is living in a country far away from your hometown.
That is actually a good question. Let me ask you that. So do you think it would be useful or wise for the students to not only exchange emails and then create some sort of like a Viber group or WhatsApp group? Would it be also advisable to connect on social media like Facebook, where people can see sort of more about you, your private life, sort of, in a sense? I know you're not a big fan of Facebook, and so I'm curious what you think about this whole business.
I think it has both pros and cons. I mean, it can work quite well for teams. So they get to know each other on a quite natural basis. But I'm a little bit hesitant to recommend that to my students. The reason being, and actually last year when I was also participating with Henley Business School, one of the best performing teams, I asked her how they communicate in the teams. And she told me she doesn't have any Facebook. So, and they were not communicating via Facebook. They were only mainly relying on email. So quite, and I asked her why you don't engage on Facebook. They said, and she answered, the reason was that she doesn't want to share her private things with the team, but that doesn't mean that she doesn't like them, but they were very focused on the task. I think she also had a little bit more mature MBA students, which didn't have a lot of time and which were not very active on social media anyway. So they've had a very good leadership. They met, and I think they did Skype every few weeks to catch up, but they didn't use social media. Now, having said that, I think there's also other teams who may be millennials who grew up with Facebook and Twitter and so on. And for them, it's completely normal. They use Facebook or any social media on a daily basis. And if they have the same interests, then I wouldn't see any reason why they should not share their social media details. But I think, I think it's difficult to generalize and say, okay, you should do this or do that. I think there should be an open discussion at the beginning, obviously transparent communication, and then decide as a team what works best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I may add to that, I personally believe that Facebook, Instagram, all of those would be very good places to connect if you want to get to know each other better. But it's very important to remember that you shouldn't take it too far. Every semester we have at least one case, well, usually not at least one case per semester approximately, where usually a man sort of likes his female team member, goes on her Facebook page and likes every photo and sends private messages 10 times a day. And so in that case, obviously, I mean, it's nice that the person is expressing attention, you know, in a way like this, but that's a little too much. And sometimes it makes the person uncomfortable.
Yes.
So you don't want to do it that way. So it's okay to share your, you know, access to your, you know, sort of feed, but please be respectful and, you know, don't assume that the person necessarily likes your likes and private messages every 10 minutes.
Yeah. And that's a good point. I mean, actually, now that you say, I remember a case when I was in South Korea, a student, female student, she was really upset about someone and she said, oh, she feels almost, it's a stalker, she feels harassed. And yeah, similar to what you were saying, almost following everywhere on Facebook. So she was quite, and she came to me then and said, oh, what should I do now? And I mean, that's a potential downside of, you know, opening up social media to a team member. There
is one more issue that, I don't want to take too much of your time, but I wanted you to comment on one more issue, and namely use of project tools such as Dropbox, Google Docs, Trello, Slack. Would those be advisable, and what are the advantages of using those kinds of tools as opposed to, for example, email attachments?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of very good tools available. They're very excellent. So they're all basically have a similar system in that they are cloud-based IT systems or cloud-based software. It means you can access, say, if you have a Dropbox folder, you can install that on your laptop, on your smartphone, on your tablet, and you can work on the files and they will update automatically. And that's a huge benefit. And given that all the students in the teams, they are based in different countries and different locations, usually almost every team uses some sort of cloud-based system. So it could be either Dropbox. A lot of students also use Google Docs if they use Gmail. Then OneDrive is also similar to Dropbox. Yeah, so I think the idea is that you put the latest version of any given report on a shared folder that everybody can access. And the main advantage of, say, using Dropbox compared to email is that you will always work on the latest version. So the problem is with email, you email back and forth the latest version, but then sometimes one person makes a mistake and edits the wrong version, and then it's
actually happened to me 2 days ago. So I'm working on a paper with Bradley Kirkman from NC State and Bill Toller here from my university, and so we decided for some reason this time to use email attachments. It's only 3 of us, and the paper was more or less ready. And so we ended up with multiple conflicting copies, and I ended up spending half a day working on the version that is like 2 weeks old. And I didn't notice that. And so we end up with 2 versions that have a lot of work in them, and it's not easy to merge them. So it literally cost me several hours of work. I'm glad that Brad noticed the problem, and so he told me, I think you have an old version here. So had we used Dropbox, where there is only one version, so everybody, you know, edits the same one version in the cloud, that would have not happened. So, or Google Docs or whatever other tool you use. So in my opinion, email attachments are evil. They will lead to multiple copies. You will get confused which one is the latest. It just takes, you know, too dangerous. Use Dropbox, Google Docs. They give you enough free space that you can, you know.
That's right. The other advantage of using a Dropbox folder, shared folder, is you can upload any material. So any articles, any papers that you think are relevant for the project. So you can have a folder about, say, market entry, and then you can put papers on there, or you can put a time schedule, and everybody can see that. So it's not only for the project report itself, but you can also upload, as you have with any folder systems. So that's the advantage, and the flexibility that you have, and the efficiency. I think that's. I usually, when I work with other people on papers and so on, we usually have always a shared Dropbox folder.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Somebody asked if it's advisable, in fact, several people, to have a Facebook group or WhatsApp group. In my opinion, what's good about it, that you sort of have your dedicated place for the conversation. If you use emails, they will be mixed with other emails. Here, even if you missed some conversation, you can always come and kind of look at the log of talks. So you can do it live if you want, but if you need to, have a little delay, you can do that. So I don't know. Do you use with your co-authors? Do you use a lot of Facebook groups or something like that?
No. I use WhatsApp with some of my closer friends, but not for collaboration. I mean, we use then traditionally email and, as I said, Dropbox. That's the main. That's
true. Yeah. Same thing with me. I don't really use with my co-workers Facebook or WhatsApp, but I believe it would be a viable place too. It allows you to share documents. It allows you to have a conversation. And as somebody mentioned, you can have the conversation live, and because it's always on, when the message comes in, you sort of see it right away in case you need to respond. Emails, sometimes you wouldn't get to it for hours.
Sometimes what I use instead of, sorry to interrupt, sometimes what I use is, instead of WhatsApp, Skype chat.
Yeah,
so
Skype would be.
If I don't want to send an email, so just a quick question, I use Skype sometimes rather than email.
Yeah, I personally, again, it seems to be regional. It looks to me like, for example, in Asia, in Europe, WhatsApp is more popular. Skype, yes. Somehow I like it a little bit better. Again, mainly because it's always on computer, on the phone. But it may be Viber, I know, is more popular in Eastern Europe and former Soviet Union. So, but as far as functionality, they're almost the same. Skype gives you the advantage of being able to share the screen if you do it on the computer. And if you work on a document, like for example, you will for XCulture, it's a big advantage because sometimes you do need to share the screen and show something to your team members. And I think that's a big deal, which I believe WhatsApp and Viber do not allow you to do. Facebook does allow now to share screens if you add a little add-on. So it's doable, but not, not by default.
Yeah. I think also Skype seems to be, at least for me, it's more like a professional tool. WhatsApp is more for friends. Or for.
That's a good point.
Yeah. Okay, let me move on to the next component here about trust.
Sorry, we started with the questions. Yes.
Okay. Sorry. So I think we talked about the difference here. Yeah. An important question, I think, generally is about how do you develop trust in a global virtual team? And in the literature, there's basically two different strands or two different areas. One is about task orientation, and the other one is about relationship orientation. Now, what does that mean? It means that now, being a global virtual team, what is usually very important is the first one, the task orientation. And I was mentioning that example before about the team who were very focused and used Skype but didn't use much social media. So how do you establish trust in those teams is, for example, by open and regular communication and by focusing on the task, and also very important, keeping to the deadlines. So you have a time frame, I mean, with XCulture, every week we have a milestone. But the important thing is, how do you establish the trust? I mean, everybody can say, okay, we will work on that. But in the end, if no one is work on that, then how can you trust the other person? So there has been some studies which argue that task orientation is more important than relationship orientation in a global virtual team. And that's the reason in terms of to develop trust. Now, that doesn't mean that you should not engage with your team members or not make an effort to get to know them. But it seems in the virtual setting, and because you can't see each other and you have different priorities, it is often a good thing to focus on the task. And actually, there's also some studies where people argue global virtual teams can be even more effective than face-to-face teams because you are not engaged with any interpersonal conflicts, any politics, you don't like the person, or
racial bias, age difference, men, women.
Any bias, yeah. you just focus on the task. We don't see each other. You work whenever you want, and in the end, you produce the outcome. So, and that feeds back quite well to the task orientation. So it's not necessarily that you are good friends with your team colleagues, but that you have a strong drive. You work towards a shared goal, have a common purpose. So in the first kickoff meeting, or the first when you get to know each other, that's usually one of the most important parts in a global virtual team. So that you as I mentioned before, that you introduce each other, that you say clearly what is the goal of the project, that you share, that you develop a sense of shared accountability, that you delegate the tasks, that you think about and consider leadership. All these things are very important in a virtual team setting. Now with relationship orientation, and that's also then where culture comes into play. I mean, in some teams, when I was in Asia, for example, in Korea, also it's not only for teams, but also in the business setting, relationship is sometimes even more important than the actual task. So that you establish the social relationship, that you get to know each other before you actually work on a project. For example, you go out with your colleagues or with the customers for lunch or for dinner. You get invited and so on, and you talk about yourself. And there's, I mean, for XCulture that will not apply, because in a way it's all virtual and there's no need to have a shared lunch together. But
although it would be nice if that option presented itself.
That would be good. I mean, you could, in theory, you could have a Skype conference and you could share coffee together. But that's a virtual coffee. Yeah, but yeah, I think there's also a cultural element. So Asian cultures, not all of them, but some of majority of them, they are more relationship oriented, task oriented. Say, for example, the US or UK or Germany. I think they often are more task oriented in terms of in terms of working. And I think that's also important to understand when you're working with different cultures and different people from different backgrounds, that you are aware that there is also a cultural element in there. So two more things that I wanted to share before we can go to the Q&A. Example of Korea and more Western cultures, say for example United Kingdom or Germany even. Indirect language. So if you talk to your team members and you have those chats or even with audio with phone conversations, Asian cultures, again, I don't want to generalize, but say in South Korea, just as an example, it's the language is quite indirect. So that means often people, if they want to say no to something, they don't say no directly. They may say, maybe, I will think about it, I will consider it. And that may lead to misunderstandings. And that happened actually to me. When I was in Korea, I always thought, oh, that's a bit vague, what does it mean? But it was actually a no. And every Korean would have known that, but I was not a Korean, I was a German. Whereas the direct language is much more direct. So you would say no, no is no, and yes is yes. And I mean, in some countries, I think in Japan, a yes maybe or sometimes a no, and the other ways around. High context versus low context. So this is similar to direct versus indirect. So with high context, again, you have a more indirect language. It's also about you want to keep face, so you don't criticize someone directly. For example, again, in Asia, you have a more softer language, not so direct. Versus, and you use the environment is very important, the setting, who is saying what. Whereas with low context cultures, including Germany or UK, you're very direct, to the point, and quite straightforward. And again, I think that comes back to communication. There may be some issues where you think, oh, that American student is so aggressive or so direct, if you are, say, a student from Korea, but that's also partly explained by culture and how you communicate with each other. Okay, so yeah, that's all for me.
Oh, yeah.
The thought of the day. Sorry, that's something that I do with my students. So I don't know if any student from Henley Business School is joining today, but
Very good.
that's what I do for every lecture. So let me just read the thought of the day. If you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward. Martin Luther King Jr.
I like this one. That's a very, very good one.
It's one of my favorites too.
Yeah, yeah. Ginalia, you had a question. If you want to unmute your microphone, we have a lot of questions, but one person kept raising her hand, so I added her here. Please go ahead, but unmute your microphone. Your microphone is muted, so you need to. Yeah, go ahead, please. You can talk now.
So, how did the cultural nuance impact Mr. Stephan's problem-solving skill in global virtual teams? Also, did the cultural what influence the way you were able to take initiative, or you can take initiative in a different way?
So language skill differences, how that may play out in the team.
That's a good question. I mean, I think from my experience in South Korea and in UK, that wasn't a big issue. I think that the bigger problems, I mean, they were all not native speakers. And also even now in the UK, most of the students, I would say 80%, are non-native speakers. They're from Asia or from Europe. I don't think it's so much language skills or the differences. It's more about whether you can work as a team and whether you have the right leadership and whether you work together. Yeah.
If you're moving forward, right, your quote, in my opinion, if you're not absolutely fluent, it doesn't mean that you should stop. If you can't fly, walk, run. If you can't run, walk. Well, it's about time, because we have some people who may be perfectly fluent in English, but they do not participate. And that's much worse than someone who may not be very fluent, but is trying and using maybe Google Translate. So it's more about effort than about skills.
Yes, I fully agree with that. So it's the effort and the motivation of the team which is important, rather than language skills.
Yeah. All right, so yeah, go ahead, please.
Do you have an issue when you live in Korea, or like that?
What do you mean by issue?
I mean the people in Korea talk English. They fluent English or not?
No. No. By the way, you have a nice background. I like your background.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What country are you in?
Indonesia.
Indonesia. So I thought maybe you're somewhere in London.
No.
Yeah.
So that's just my question.
Yeah.
No, so I wouldn't worry too much about language if you are not fluent in English. Yeah, as I said, most of my students, they are not native speakers and they still perform very well.